They say opposites attract. But what happens when two people are from opposite religions? Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Unequally yoked.
Welcome to the Big E, the elephant in the room. I know y'all are wondering, this is a change of scenery. The Big E is normally behind the scenes, behind a restream. But God has blessed us today to be at Trinity Worship Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, with live panel guests. So we are truly thankful to be here today. My name is Melissa, and we have a great panel guest today. We have Angeline Walker, we have Quest Green, and Faith Green. So we want to thank you, everyone, for being part of this panel discussion, and viewers, thank you for viewing in as well. Today we will be discussing Unequally Yoked. Some of you have heard over the years, when you get married, you have to be equally yoked. In our world today, does equally yoked still hold the same standards and value? In 2 Corinthians 6:14, the New International Version, translation says, "Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers." Some say, "Don't be yoked together with unbelievers," while others say, "Don't be teamed up with unbelievers." So, with that being said, what happens when there are two polar viewpoints in doctrine, culture, and religious views? So I'm going to turn it to the panel guests, and I would like to dive into this wonderful conversation.
Well, first I want to say thank you, Melissa, for just having us here and for putting together this particular program. I think that most of us, as Melissa said, growing up, hearing unequally yoked we all had a lot of different interpretations of what that meant. And I think that's why we're having this forum today, because I know for myself, and I am a mother, I'm a wife, my husband and I will be married for 13 years in August. We've been together for over 20 years, almost, well, I don't want to date myself, but over 20 years. We met as teens. But when I met my husband, I have been raised in the church, you know, Pathfinders on Sunday, Bible study on Wednesday, choir rehearsal on Friday, Sabbath, then we do it again, right? My husband, on the other hand, was raised Baptist, but his father never went to church, but his mother took them to church, but then they started not going to church as much, so he had a lot of sketchiness going on. Ironically, when I met my husband, I was a little unsure about where I stood, you know, in terms of, I always knew God was first in my life, but I was a little unsure of where I stood in terms of just church, right? So I don't know if I can say we were equally yoked because we both had different varying backgrounds, but we were kind of similar in that we both loved the Lord, but just had our own opinions about church. And so I think, though, to start this discussion, you have to kind of have an idea of what that even means, yoke, right?
Yes.
Because I know as a child, I was like, I never even took the time to break down what that even looked like or why they even used that particular metaphor. Mm-hmm. So I did see something online that I hope is helpful for especially our young people who are hearing this, maybe hearing it for the first time about the whole concept of unequally yoked. But a yoke is a wooden bar that joins two oxen to each other and to the burden that they're pulling to whatever destination. An unequally yoked team has one stronger ox and one weaker, or one taller and one shorter. The weaker or shorter ox would walk more slowly than the taller, stronger one. causing the load to go around in circles. When oxen are unequally yoked, they cannot perform the task set before them. Instead of working together, they are at odds with one another. So I'll leave that there and allow Quest to pick it up from there.
When we speak of the topic unequally yoked, within the context of church and within the context of marriage, we have a tendency to think about same religion, same belief system, same opinion, same thought, and that's not necessarily true. When we read and we study about what unequally yoked is as far as the Bible is concerned, we first have to remember that some people take that term literal, especially, with the definition. And the Bible is not necessarily a word of, like, when you read stuff literally, it's a book of practices, policies, and principles. So in other words, is Christ the focus of your living? Faith and I don't always see everything eye to eye. This is my wife, by the way. Thank you so much. I forgot to tell you thank you for allowing us to be here, first and foremost. But Faith and I don't always see things eye to eye. But at the end of the day, what is our focal point? I always say I don't even know how people do marriage without God. Simply because she is a female and I'm a male, that in and of itself, wiring and everything else, there's differences already right off the back. Yeah. So at the end of the day, when it comes to unequally yoked, she don't have to agree to the same thing that I agree to, because her truth is her truth and my truth is my truth. The question is, at the end of the day, does her truth and my truth line up with the truth?
Yes, amen.
And so we'll get deeper into it, but when Faith first and I got together, she was Jehovah's Witness and I was always Adventist. I never pushed her to become a part of the faith. My whole thing was, this is what I do, this is my lifestyle, and if you want to be a part of that, then this is what it is. And so it went on from there, and then God gave me confirmation. Was she a part of this faith? Nope. I've had couples that I've coached before who are going, actually one couple in particular, who are going into their 6th year of blissful marriage. And they come from 2 different faiths. And I had an Adventist pastor say that he wouldn't marry them because they were of different faiths. And one, the wife ended up becoming a part of the husband's church, which is the Adventist church. And they're now moving into 6 years of blissful marriage. She's just as active in the church as he is. Same story with me and Faith. And it was crazy because God gave him the confirmation that it was okay to go ahead and marry her. Adventism had nothing to do with it. I'm going to say something and people think that it's heresy, but it really isn't. The only people that are concerned about Adventism is Adventists.
Well, Quest, with that being said, can religions and various perspectives come in one accord for a common goal?
I'm a firm believer that just because we don't have the same belief system doesn't mean that we can't work together towards the common goal. Of course, outside the context of marriage, of course. I have friends that are Muslim. I don't have to say no more. The belief system, and like we all believe in God, but they believe Jesus was a prophet, back and forth. Like we can go back and forth on philosophical and biblical beliefs all day long. But if we want to focus on a goal within the community, Black Lives Matter was a prime example of how people from different races, religions, creeds can come together and say that thing is wrong. And although we may be different in color and we may be different in belief system, we can work together to accomplish better for that common goal. So
you had mentioned, Faith, you were of one belief and Quest was of another belief, and same as Angeline. So what if someone changes their mind about everything once they get married, but then switch back and say, you know what, it's not for me? Do you still support that person and your spouse in that decision and still become working together as one, or do you decide to just let really God work on their heart and just be patient with that situation?
I think for me, so when my husband and I met, he wasn't Adventist, and he didn't know anything about Adventism, right? He didn't understand the whole keeping the Sabbath. And so I remember, and like Quest said, getting that confirmation. from God that it was okay. Because I was going through my own spiritual walk too, building my own relationship with God. And I remember just specifically saying, okay, Lord, like having several encounters where I was like, okay, Lord, I'm just going to open this Bible. You know what's on my heart, and you're going to show me what it is that you want me to know. Like, I was just laying it out there for God, right? And I know specifically one time when I was praying about, was this the person that I'm supposed to even be with? And I opened the Bible, and I remember landing on 1 Corinthians 7, verse 12, which talks about the unbeliever, marrying the unbeliever. I'm sorry, 7 verse 14. And it just basically is talking about the unbelieving husband or the unbelieving wife marrying the spouse that is a believer, and that they are sanctified. Basically meaning that your lifestyle as a Christian, my lifestyle as an Adventist, because even though I was iffy about church, I still believed in the Sabbath, and I still believed in God. And so because I was still like trying to strive for that relationship with God, I was, going to church. And so my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, but he would come to church with me. And so here it is all these years later, he's able to say that he believes in the Sabbath because of me. I'm the one that brought him in. Like, he'll tell you that. And so to answer that question, I think that when it comes to marriage, especially as a believer, God has a way of working in there. It's not really about us. I heard before that God could care less about the whole marriage thing. Yeah. It's more about us as individuals, right? And if we can use our marriage as that vehicle to bring others closer to Christ, whether it's ourselves as couples or other people. I remember a pastor once saying to me, when you and your husband go out, make sure that people see you all holding hands, being kind to one another, not arguing, fighting, things like that, because then they'll wonder, where does that come from? Yes. And that in itself is a testimony of God's love. Exactly. And so I hope I answered your question, because I forgot the question.
No, you're fine, because I want to add this to that. I want to ask both of you, do you divorce that person because the scriptures tell you not to join with someone that is not the same yoke?
Once again, the Bible is a book of policies, practices, and principles. God hates divorce. Yes, he does. But God don't want you to sit nowhere and endure abuse either. Yes. If I'm pleading with you, if we both agreed, we discussed our core values before we got married, we got premarital counseling, we did everything that we were supposed to do, and we were now in this situation, I don't get the right to just up and divorce you without doing everything that I could possibly do within my power, yes, according to what God is telling me to do, to make sure that you know that I love you. Okay, so the word declares, right, first and foremost, Ephesians 5:25, and for this reason, for the reason of marriage, shall a man leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. You think that when we do that and we come together that the enemy ain't mad? So there's a possibility that we could have been in agreement when we first got married, and after we got married, something happened along the line. The enemy came in, whatever happened, and one of them might be thinking differently, right? The word declares, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave his life for it. There are things that if the marriage relationship is a mirror of our relationship with God, with us being the bride and him being the husband, if you a husband and your wife tripping, right? We are the wife. So when we do what we do in terms of sin and we disappoint God, it's mind-boggling to me how God still loves us with the same intensity, the same fervor, the same energy as if we never did nothing at all. And now he's calling you in the context of marriage to love your wife the same way I love the church and gave my life for it. So now you telling me that just because she did X, Y, and Z, go into your closet and get on your face and pray over her. Walk out in the morning, walk and talk with God, and be patient the same way that he's patient and long-suffering and kind with us. The flip side of that is that if your husband's tripping, in the book of Luke, I think it says that if your husband is a knucklehead unbeliever, it will be your respectful behavior for him that will win him over. Consistency. what we have a tendency to do is we let emotions dictate to us what our response is going to be to any given situation. When I was studying how the mind works, when a thought comes in or when an activity comes in place, it comes in at the base of your neck, right? This is where the thoughts come into your mind, at the back of your mind. Then it passes through what is called the limbic system, right? And then from the limbic system, it goes to the frontal lobe where we make all of our decisions and we show, right, like, where we're present, we're aware. Yes, I will do that. No, I will not do that. The funny thing about it is that the emotions rest in the limbic system. So you literally feel before you actually get to think out what's happening for you. And what we have a tendency to do is we don't stop and think what's happening. Emotions are not to be ignored, but they're not to be placed in charge either. So in other words, when I feel something, I need to take a moment. The emotion is only for me to indicate that something is wrong, and the onus is on me to investigate why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling rather than respond adversely to my spouse. Because once I do that, I've drawn somebody into it now, and now we're creating a dynamic, and long after I'm back to myself, my spouse is still feeling a way behind what I said or did to them. So as it relates to, what you answering yourself, or coming back full circle, I don't get to just leave because they switch their mind. I can go into my closet, I can pray and say, God, I know that you ordained this. I know the enemy is present here. And according to my faith and according to the promises, I need you to work this out.
Yes. Well, thank you. You have some more insight?
Yeah, I wanted to add to that. Thank you, Quest. I also think that marriage is a direct parallel to the church, right?
Yes.
So does God get to divorce us, right?
No,
if we
no,
come
of
to
course.
church and we're iffy or we're unsure or, we're still, getting to know who we are and things like that. Does he divorce? Does he leave us? No, he doesn't, right? And so I think God allows us to have the marriage as that example so that we can see what it is to be a part of the church, right? And to understand God's love for us as believers, but also his love for us as we're married with our spouses. And so, as we're going through our church experience and we're understanding, just the different aspects of religion and whatever, and we may have some different varying thoughts, so also in marriage, we change our minds, we think differently, but God's grace is so sufficient that he's with us through that process. And so he doesn't just leave us because we changed our minds. And so he doesn't want us to just leave our spouse because of that as well.
We know that God has called you to a mission, but sometimes you need a little help getting there. At the Center for Clergy and Church Support, we strive to encourage, empower, and equip ministries and nonprofit organizations to do all that God has called them to do. We handle basic legal issues, conduct administrative and financial audits, and strengthen organizations in community engagement and capacity building. Let us help your ministry or nonprofit in advancing the kingdom of God. Visit clergycenter.org for more information.
We're dealing with a lot of racial disparities and a lot of things that's going on in our world. So is marrying someone of a different race considered unequally yoked?
You looking at it right here. You know what I said? Like, you're looking at it right here.
Then we should have never been married.
And I'm proud to say we celebrated 10 years of marriage this year, 10 years of blissful marriage. You know what I mean? God don't love one race of people over another race. God's ministry is worldwide. To the Jew, the Gentile, to the Greek, for real. Go ye therefore and teach all nations. You know what I'm saying? And if our relationship, if our marriage relationship is you can't help who you love. You love who you love. You know what I'm saying? And once again, being unequally yoked, I think being unequally yoked, and we'll talk more about it in a minute, has more to do with compatibility over chemistry. So just because she might be a different race, don't mean that we're not compatible. So.
Well, I brought that up because people think in those terms. So this is why the Big E is here, to really bring clarity, to let people know it doesn't make a difference. So this is directly a question I have to actually put out for the young people. The young people today see so much on social media. They see it on television. They see families, their loved ones getting divorced, separated. And there's a new trend That trend is called polyamorous. Yes, I brought that word up, polyamorous. Does the younger generation seek other forms of relationships like polyamorous due to the pressure of various viewpoints in doctrine, culture, or religious views?
I just need you real quick to go ahead and define polyamorous.
So if no one knows what polyamorous means that there's one man or one woman that is in relationship with someone else. But they feel that there is someone else they feel that can be part of their union. So it could be one man and two women, or one woman and two men. So that is what the new generation is seeing. That is what the generation is seeing on internet all over, and they feel that this is the better way to go because they can be able to have basically a relationship. They love this person, they love that person, they don't want to break up, they don't want to hurt anyone's feeling, and then they don't have to worry about the divorce, they don't have to worry about separation. This world today is all about love is love. Let's love everyone. So I think polyamorous has really spiked, especially in our generation today. And it was very important to bring this conversation up because the church, especially our young people, need to know. Go ahead, Quest.
Yeah, so I wanted to say this, right? When you think of the institution of marriage, number one, it being created by God, you know what I'm saying? He admonishes us, me and Faith, to become one flesh. I can't become one flesh with her and two or three other women. Some of us would like to try. You know what I'm saying? But that's not the will of God. Yeah. There's only one person. I can't become one with my church. That's why in my house there's an order of operations. God first, my wife second, the kids third. There'll be times where Faith will want me to do something and I'll be like, no, yeah, I love you, but I'm going to have to disappoint you on this one because God said X, Y, and Z. And so everything, you know what I'm saying, goes back to normal. But as it relates to oneness and this polyamorous, people have this idea that what I can't get from you, I can get from this person over here. And what I can't get from the two of you, I can get from this person over here. And it's almost like they want to form Voltron with the three people to get all the things that they need. But I want to reiterate to people that, well, let me say this first. People do that so that they can achieve a certain level of happiness, right? Let me say this first. First of all, if you're dating and you're not dating with the purposes of finding a potential mate for marriage, then what are you doing? You shouldn't be dating. If you are not dating to find a potential mate for marriage, then you need not be dating. What is the purpose of dating? That is what the purpose of dating is for. With that being said, once you become married, married is not for the purposes of making you happy. Marriage is for the purposes of making you holy, or whole, if you will. And the byproduct of being holy or whole is happiness. What people want to do is circumvent the process and try to get to happiness. Happiness is a byproduct of wholeness. I think whole in my spirit. I think whole mentally. I operate physically from a wholeness state. Being mentally healthy, the byproduct of that is happiness, right? So, with that being said, when I'm in relationship, there's a difference between hurt and harm. There will be times where Faith will say stuff to me in the relationship that will hurt me, but it won't harm me. And if I'm looking at it from a healthy place, I'll make the necessary adjustments and become better because of it. What we forget is that, like, for real, and I'm just speaking from a husband's perspective, my wife is my helpmeet, but not only to help me carry forward my vision. As a helpmeet, she has the right to tell me about things that I'm doing or not doing as it relates to who I'm supposed to be as a man of God. And anytime I fall out of line, it's her responsibility to bring me back. Now, sometimes it's going to sting, the stuff that she says, but it won't harm me. And there's a difference in between the two. And so as it relates, I wanted to read this too, this text, because I knew we was going to go here. There's a text in Matthew, right? And it's in Matthew 19, and it's verses 5 and 6, and it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let no man separate. He didn't say Adam and Mary, Eve and Chanel. He said Adam and Eve, two, and those two become one. So as far as people talking about this polyamorous stuff, you're doing like the word saying, you whoring after other nations.
Yes. Yes.
I want to add, I believe that the younger generation is going towards that type of relationship because they haven't been taught what relationship really is supposed to be, especially with our God, with a relationship with Jesus Christ. And the church needs to do better in helping our young people form a relationship versus routine, versus religion, versus rules, regulations. And so when we don't teach our young people what it is to have a healthy relationship, first and foremost with Christ, and then with those that we are going to be dating, then we cause this ripple effect that they want to feel connected so badly, right? And I see it in our young people. I see it in our daughter. I see it even in my young sons. They want to have a connection. They want to have conversations. They want to talk. They want to be heard. And they are not being heard. And so they go out and they find relationships all over the place that they're not supposed to be in. And too many relationships, right? So if we teach our young people from the very beginning, from when they're little, all the way through to teenagers and young adulthood, how to have that proper relationship. And first and foremost, let's put away what they cannot do. Show them what they can do with what God has given them. That's I think we wouldn't have such a hard time with them.
Do you have insight, Angeline?
I just want to say again, if we're relating our marriages, and I'm speaking about marriages, directly to the church, if God is, the love that we have in our marriages is just as much as God's love for the church, then we know that God doesn't want us to worship any other gods. He's a jealous God, right? And so when in our relationship with the church, we're not coming to church to worship various gods, to develop polyamorous relationships with other deities, right? And so we shouldn't be doing that in our marriages as well.
Well, I thank you for that clarification on that, Faith. That was truly a great answer because that was something I was going to jump into about the younger generation regarding Unequally Yoked, really just trying to allow them to understand it better. But I want to jump into more of what the Big E always talks about. What is the church doing? What can leadership in the church do better, providing support to couples and young people that are hearing this discussion today?
Establish relationship with your young people. The church doesn't have a solid relationship with its young people. I read maybe about 2 years ago in one of our Adventist publications that young people are leaving the church in droves. I think it said 18.4%, and I'm talking within the Adventist faith. 18.4% of the church is under the age of 25. Wow. 18.4% under the age of 25. Then I think it went to say like another 4.95% is under the age of 18. And I was like, wow. So that means our church is becoming nothing but a church of old folk. Yes. That's dangerous. Because who's going to carry on if all of them are gone? Who's going to carry on the lifestyle? Who's going to carry on the love? Who's going to carry on the legacy of the church? Right? And so I'm a firm believer in the fact that if you want to do something different, establish relationship with your young people. And that everything else, because what we have a tendency to do is tell them we want to do this or we want to, and they're like, why are you talking to me? We don't even have a relationship.
Yeah. Yes, I think the young people, they're so used to rules and order. I know growing up in the church I was raised in New York, in Harlem, New York, it was Ephesus. We had a series of young people that really worked with us. I mean, the generation, and I can talk candidly, there was one individual, Leslie Phipps, which is Jeff Phipps' sister. She was truly a youth leader, director, supporter, advocate. She didn't care if you didn't know how to sing, if you did know how to sing, no matter what. She put you out there and she said, you can do it. I don't think we have those individuals that will push us, give us the drive, give us that support and that encouragement that we need today. And the older generation, they've done their part. They've done their part. Now it's time for the next generation to move to push the younger generation. And like Quest, you just said, they're basically fading out. So it's very unfortunate, but it's not just the Adventist church. And I'm just going to let you know, the Big E, the elephant in the room, we don't just focus on the Adventist church. This is the Christian church community. Every church, Adventist, Baptist, Methodist, no matter, they are all going through the same thing. Everybody is dealing with the same issues, the same circumstances, and we have to, as a church community, come together, unite, and figure out ways that we can drive our young people back into church, drive our community to say, oh, well, I don't know if I really want to go there because, you know, they don't do this, they don't do that. We can't have that stigma. We can't have that stigma. So I just want to, at this point, kind of bring it out. And this is actually, since the COVID, we've always done all of our episodes behind the scenes. We've never had a live audience. So we just want to know, does anyone have any insight or any input to this conversation?
Hello, everyone. So you guys did an excellent job with explaining what, you know, being unequally yoked is not, right? It's not about race. It's not necessarily about your denomination or religion per se. Could you just go a little bit more into what is God actually warning us against when he's saying that we should not be unequally yoked?
Perfect question. When Adam and Eve was created, long before the 10 Commandments came into play, long before rules and regulations came into play, he formed them from the dust of the ground. Yep, you know the story. Took a rib from Adam, breathed into them the breath of life, and they became a living soul. The first thing that God said to Adam and Eve was to be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, have dominion. That sounds to me like build something. Can anybody say anything different? Get to work in building. I cannot build. Amos 3:3 says 2 people can't move in the same direction lest they touch and agree. Faith and I are different in terms of her being a female and me being a male. I'll tell you my philosophy. Even though we're different, what is the common goal, and how do we work together together towards the common goal? We'll bump heads as it relates to how we get it done, but you're not the problem, I'm not the problem. The problem is the problem. Let's work together against the problem and not each other. So as it relates to that, like for real, there's one thing that we have in mind. Be fruitful, multiply, subdue the earth, have dominion. That the enemy knows that that is the first commandment that God ever gave man and woman to do. And so he's got you distracted in terms of race. He's got you distracted in terms of religion. He's got you distracted in terms of all of these different things rather than just being fruitful, multiplying, subduing the earth, and having dominion. That's what the first thing God commanded us to do. If we would do that, all of this dissipates.
I think that's why the story of the ox that, you know, Angeline, I know this, Angeline said in the beginning was so powerful because the ox had a job to do, right? And if one is not working with the other, then they can't get their job done. And so that is what God told us to do. We are to be together to get a job done. We are to be together, and that's what equally yoked means. When we are equally yoked, the common goal that we set for ourselves as a couple is to accomplish that. That is why before we got married, we set core values. Our value system is this, 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 and this. Is that your value system? Yes, those are mine as well. Then those are the goals. If we go against those goals, then we become unequally yoked because we agreed that this is the list we're going to follow as a family, as a husband and wife.
And I think we have to put that verse in context as well, because Paul was the writer of that verse, and we know that at that particular time, they were building the Christian church, and they were spreading the gospel, right? And so Paul said a lot of things about marriage. In fact, he said at one point, you know, if it's better to be by yourself, right, instead of being married. But if you're going to be, you know, X, Y, and Z, right? But he also said, you know, don't be yoked together with unbelievers, right? So at that time, their goal in the context of that text was to bring non-believers to Christ, to build the Christian church, right? And so if you're going to, I think in his mindset, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Paul wanted, if you're going to couple up, understand that your common goal is Christ. That's the common goal. So if you're going to be with someone who is totally against Christ, there's going to be some challenges. Just like the oxen, you can't have a weak one and a strong one, right? There's going to be some definite challenges. Does it mean that God can't still work in those challenges? Yeah, he could still work in those challenges, but I think Paul is warning you, letting you know there's going to be some issues if one of you is a believer and one isn't, because the common goal should be Christ.
And we thank you, Trinity Worship Center, for being here. And like I always say, thank you for being part of the Big E, the elephant in the room, where we speak about the unspeakable.